Chapter 1: The Shocking Homecoming. John pulled into his driveway and nearly slammed the brakes when he saw the bright red "Sold" sign planted in his front yard. His heart skipped a beat. Confused, he glanced at the house, expecting to see a prank or mistake. Instead, he saw strangers carrying boxes inside his home. For a moment, he thought maybe he had pulled into the wrong driveway. He double-checked the address. No, this was his house. The same porch swing, the ridiculous garden gnome his wife bought on sale, the house he'd lived in for years. A man in cargo shorts and a woman in yoga pants stood by the moving truck, directing movers. They looked settled, happy, like they'd just found their dream home. John stepped out of his car, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Excuse me, what the hell is going on here?" The couple turned to look at him. The man raised an eyebrow. Who are you?" John's stomach clenched. "I live here. This is my house." The woman laughed nervously, clutching a folder of papers. "No, it's our house. We just bought it, from the HOA." John blinked. "The HOA?" His voice rose in pure boiling confusion. "I'm not even in an HOA." The man sighed, flipping through the documents. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but we legally bought this place." He held up a paper with John's address, but instead of John's name, there were two strangers listed as the new owners. John's hands clenched into fists. His pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just a mistake, this was a nightmare. Then came the smug nasal voice that made his blood run cold. "Oh, you're back. Didn't think you'd return so soon." Chapter 2: Karen's Fraudulent Empire. John turned to see Karen, the neighborhood busybody, the self-proclaimed president of an HOA that didn't actually exist. She stood on the sidewalk, smirking like some suburban warlord. "Karen," John said, narrowing his eyes. "What did you do?" She scoffed, folding her arms. "We, the Homeowners Association, declared your property abandoned after your extended absence. You can't just leave a house empty like that. We have rules." John's blood boiled. He'd been gone for 3 weeks on a work trip, not months, not years. 3 weeks. Karen continued, all faux sympathy. "Since it was considered abandoned, we exercised our right to claim it and sell it to a responsible new owner. You weren't maintaining the property. The grass got a little long. The mailbox was overflowing. Clear signs of neglect." John's jaw dropped. "Are you out of your damn mind? You sold my house because my grass was long." Karen gave a tight, satisfied smile. "It's nothing personal. It's about maintaining neighborhood standards." John turned to the new homeowners, desperate. "You guys seriously thought this was legit?" The man hesitated, glancing between the paperwork and John. We were told it was a foreclosure under HOA rules. Everything checked out legally." John let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, I guarantee you it didn't." But before he could say anything else, the police showed up. Of course, Karen had called them. "There's a trespasser on private property," she said in a sing-song voice. John saw red. He was standing on his driveway, arguing about his house, and now the cops were looking at him like he was the problem. One officer stepped forward, resting a hand on his belt. "Sir, I need you to calm down." John's voice shook with outrage. "Calm down. These lunatics just stole my house." The officer sighed, flipping through the papers handed to him by the new homeowners. "This looks like a civil matter. If you have a problem, you'll need to take it to court." John's stomach twisted. He had read stories like this before, homeowners losing their property through fraudulent HOAs, loopholes, and legal red tape, but he never imagined it could happen to him. Chapter 3. Calling in the cavalry. Calling in the cavalry. Karen smirked, clearly enjoying herself. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay, John. These lovely people actually pay their HOA dues. That was it. That was the moment something in John snapped. He wasn't just going to fight this. He was going to burn her entire fake HOA empire to the ground. He pulled out his phone and made one call. Mike, I need you to bury someone in legal hell. Mike's laughter rumbled through the phone. Oh, someone finally pissed you off enough to call me. John stared at Karen. Whose smugness faltered for the first time. Oh yeah. John said, his voice deadly calm. And I want to ruin them. Karen's expression flickered. She had no idea who Mike was. She was about to find out. Because Mike wasn't just a lawyer. He was a litigation monster who ate HOA fraudsters for breakfast. And Karen, she was already choking. Chapter 4. The counterattack. The next morning, John woke up on his best friend's couch, still fuming. He had barely slept, replaying every insane moment of the previous day in his head. His own damn house had been stolen out from under him, and the police had just shrugged and told him to take it to court. If there was any justice in the world, Karen and her ridiculous fake HOA should be the ones in handcuffs, not walking around acting like they own the entire neighborhood. Mike, his lawyer and longtime friend, had been way too excited when John explained the situation the night before. John had expected maybe some outrage, but instead, Mike had grinned like someone had just handed him a winning lottery ticket. You don't understand, Mike had said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. I love taking down fake HOAs. This is going to be fun. By noon, they were sitting in Mike's office, going over every detail. Mike leaned back in his chair, flipping through the paperwork Karen had filed. So, let me get this straight, Mike said, raising an eyebrow. You were gone for 3 weeks, and this lunatic decided your house was abandoned and sold it? John exhaled sharply. Yep. Because my grass got a little long. Mike whistled. That's a new one. Usually, these frauds at least pretend to have real legal backing. But this is amateur hour. He flipped to another page and burst out laughing. Oh my God, look at this. She literally signed the sales contract herself as the president of the HOA. John frowned. Mike's grin widened. And there is no official HOA. It doesn't exist. There's nothing in the county records, no formal association, nothing. Karen just made it up. John's jaw tightened. So, what does that mean? Mike leaned forward. It means she's screwed. And I mean royally screwed. This is fraud, wire fraud, real estate fraud, and I can probably argue for theft on a grand scale. Plus, if she collected money from other homeowners in the neighborhood under the guise of an HOA, that's embezzlement. John's rage simmered just under the surface. So, we can sue. Mike grinned like a shark. Oh, we're going to do a hell of a lot more than sue. You don't understand, Mike the confrontation, said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. Hours, Mike had drafted a lawsuit. I love so taking brutal, down fake HOAs. It could have been a medieval execution order. This is fraud, going to be fun. Property theft. By noon, illegal sale they were of real sitting estate, in Mike's office, misrepresentation, going over every detail. Karen was looking at enough charges to drown in legal fees alone. Flipping through the paperwork Karen had filed. But that wasn't even the best part. So, let me get this straight. Mike had also filed an injunction to freeze all transactions on the house. You were gone, which meant the new homeowners and this lunatic decided your house was abandoned and sold it. The house was still tied up in John's name. John exhaled sharply. That evening, John and Mike drove back to the neighborhood. Because my grass got a little long. The moving truck was still parked outside. But the new homeowners were nowhere to be seen. Usually, these frauds at least pretend to have real legal backing. Was standing in the driveway, laughing with a group of neighbors. This is amateur hour. John's anger burned hot. He flipped to another page and burst out laughing. He had planned to avoid a confrontation, but
Oh
seeing
my
her
God,
standing there
look at
acting like
this.
nothing had happened was
She
the final
literally
straw.
signed the sales contract herself
strode
as
right
the
up to
president
her,
of the HOA.
watching her expression shift from
John
amusement to
frowned.
annoyance. Mike's grin
Oh,
widened.
you again.
And there is no
Karen
official
crossed her
HOA.
arms.
It
I
doesn't
thought
exist.
you would have
moved on by now. There's nothing in the county
John
records.
smirked.
No formal association.
Oh, I have.
Nothing.
Karen
Straight to a
just made it
lawsuit.
up.
Mike
John's
stepped
jaw
forward,
tightened.
waving the thick legal
So,
document
what
in
does
front
that
of her
mean?
face. Mike leaned
Congratulations,
forward.
Karen.
It means she's screwed.
You're being sued for fraud.
And I mean
theft,
royally screwed.
and
about a dozen other things
This
that are
is
going
fraud,
to financially ruin
wire
you.
fraud,
Real estate
Karen's
fraud,
smugness
and I can
wavered.
probably argue for
You
theft on a
can't.
grand scale.
I can't.
Mike
Plus,
interrupted
if
smoothly.
she collected money from other homeowners
And I already
in the
did.
neighborhood under the guise of
In
an
fact,
HOA,
I've also
that's
reported you to the
embezzlement.
county fraud department.
John's
real
rage
estate
simmered
commission,
just under the
and
surface.
oh yeah, the IRS.
So,
we can sue.
Because I have a feeling you
Mike
haven't
grinned
been
like
paying
a shark.
taxes on all that illegal HOA
we're going to
money
do a
you've
hell
been
of a lot more
collecting.
than sue.
Karen's face
Chapter
lost
5,
a little color.
The confrontation.
This is ridiculous.
Within hours, Mike
John
had drafted
folded
a
his
lawsuit
arms.
so brutal it could have
Is
been a
it?
medieval execution
Because
order.
the judge
Fraud,
didn't seem to think so when
property
he
theft,
froze the sale
illegal
of my house.
sale of real estate,
Those
misrepresentation.
poor buyers you scammed.
Karen was looking at
Yeah,
enough
they
charges
legally
to drown
can't
in
move
legal
in.
fees alone.
The sale
But
is
that
invalid.
wasn't even the best part.
And you
Mike
just
had
committed
also
a
filed
major
an
crime.
injunction to freeze all
Karen
transactions on the
sputtered.
house, which
You
meant the
can't
new
sue the
homeowners
HOA.
couldn't legally take possession.
We have rules.
The house was still
Mike
tied up in
actually
John's
laughed.
name. You
That
don't even have an
evening,
HOA.
John and Mike
Karen
drove
back to the neighborhood.
You made it up.
The moving truck
There's
was
no
still
board,
parked outside,
no legal
but the new
filings,
homeowners were
nothing.
nowhere to be seen.
You just decided you were
Karen,
in charge
however,
and started
was
scamming
standing in the
people.
driveway, laughing
Karen
with a group
opened
of
her
neighbors,
mouth,
then shut it again.
John's anger burned
Her
hot.
confidence had cracked.
He had
but she
planned to
wasn't ready
avoid
to
a confrontation.
confrontation. But seeing her
This
standing
is just
there
a
acting like nothing
misunderstanding.
had
She
happened
tried,
was the final
her
straw.
voice a
little higher now.
He strode right up to her.
I was just trying to
watching her
protect
expression
property
shift
values
from
amusement to annoyance.
Mike shook his head.
Oh, you again.
Yeah,
Tell that to the judge.
Karen crossed her arms.
Oh wait, you'll have
I
plenty
thought
of
you would
time
have
to do
moved
that
on by
next
now.
week when you appear in court.
John smirked. Karen's eye twitched.
Oh, I have. She was starting to
Straight
understand
to
this
a
wasn't just a
lawsuit.
mild inconvenience.
Mike stepped forward,
She
waving
was in
the
the serious
legal
legal
document
trouble
in front of her face.
Chapter 6.
Congratulations, Karen.
The day of the court
You're
hearing
being sued
arrived
for
faster
fraud,
than John
theft,
expected,
and
about a dozen other things
He
that are
sat
going to
outside the
financially
courtroom
ruin
with
you.
Mike,
running a hand
Karen's
through his hair
smugness
as the
wavered.
reality of the situation
You
settled
can't.
in.
The
The
last
last
few
few
days
days
have been a whirlwind of
smoothly.
legal filings,
And I
frozen
already did.
transactions, and
In
Karen
fact,
trying,
I've also
and
reported
failing
you to the county
to
fraud
manipulate her
department,
way out
real
of the
estate
mess she had
commission,
created.
and oh yeah, the
She
IRS.
had sent
passive-aggressive emails
Because I have a
attempted
feeling
to
you
talk
haven't
the new
been paying
homeowners
taxes
into
on
working
all that
things
illegal
out,
HOA
and even
money
called in
you've
some
been
of her
collecting.
fake HOA supporters
Karen's
to vouch
face
for
lost
her.
a little color.
None of it worked.
This is ridiculous.
The law was on John's
John
side,
folded his
and now it
arms.
was time to prove it.
Is it?
When the bailiff
Because the
finally
judge
called them
didn't
in,
seem to think
John
so when he
stood
froze
tall,
the sale
his
of my
heart
house.
pounding as he walked into the courtroom.
Those poor buyers you scammed.
Karen was already seated at
Yeah,
the defendant's
they legally
table,
can't move
looking
in.
more rattled than usual.
The sale is invalid.
The confidence, the smug
And
superiority,
you just committed
gone.
a major crime.
In its place was a
Karen
woman who knew
sputtered.
she was in deep trouble,
You
but
can't
was still
sue the
grasping
HOA.
at any last shred of control.
We have rules.
The judge, an
Mike
older man
actually
with
laughed.
a stern face and a no-nonsense
You don't even have an
attitude,
HOA.
looked over
Karen.
the case file for a long
You
moment
made it up.
before adjusting his glasses.
There's no board, no legal
Let me get
filings,
this straight, nothing.
he said, glancing at
You
Karen.
just decided you were in charge
You,
and started
as president
scamming
of a
people.
homeowners association,
Karen opened her
sold
mouth,
this man's house
then shut it
because
again.
you believed it was abandoned.
Her confidence had cracked,
Karen cleared
but she
her
wasn't
throat
ready to
and
crumble
lifted her
just
chin.
yet.
This
Yes,
is just a
Your Honor.
misunderstanding, she tried.
As per
her
HOA
voice a little
guidelines,
higher now.
abandoned properties are
I was
subject
just
to
trying to
recovery
protect
and resale
property values.
to maintain neighborhood standards.
Mike shook his head.
The judge flipped
Yeah,
a page
tell
in the
that to the
file.
judge.
According to
Oh,
county
wait,
records,
you'll have plenty
there is
of
no
time to do
registered
that next
homeowners
week
association
when you appear
in
in
this
court.
neighborhood.
Karen's
Karen's
twitched.
lips pressed into a thin line.
She was starting to understand
That's
this wasn't just a
clerical
mild
error.
inconvenience.
Mike let out a quiet
She was
chuckle,
in serious
and John
legal
had
trouble.
to fight the urge to smile.
Chapter 6.
The
Justice
judge was
served.
already unimpressed.
The day of the court hearing
This was
arrived
going to be
faster
easier
than
than
John
expected.
The judge
He
sat
turned his
outside
sharp
the
gaze
courtroom
back
with
to
Mike,
Karen,
running a hand through
and
his
you were
hair
the
as
sole
the reality
person
of the
responsible for
situation
overseeing
settled
this
in.
transaction.
The last few
Karen
days have been a
nodded.
whirlwind of legal filings,
Yes, as the
frozen
acting president of the
transactions,
HOA,
and Karen trying, and
Mike
failing,
stood up
to manipulate her
Your
way
Honor,
out of the
let's
mess
be
she
clear
had
about
created.
something. She was not
passive-aggressive
as the president of anything, attempted to talk the new homeowners into working
does
things
not
out,
exist in
and
any
even
legal
called in some of her
capacity.
fake HOA supporters
There was never
to
a
vouch
vote,
for her.
no registration,
None of
no
it
tax
worked.
filings, no
The law
board.
was on John's side.
She just
and
took it
now
upon
was
herself
time
to invent
authority, and then
when the
used that
bailiff
to commit
finally
fraud.
called them in,
John
Karen
stood tall,
scoffed,
his heart pounding as
That's
he walked
not
into
true.
the courtroom.
Mike
Karen
smirked.
was already seated at
Then
the defendant's
please provide
table,
the court
looking
with the
more
official
rattled than
HOA
usual.
documentation.
The confidence,
Karen
the smug
hesitated.
superiority, gone. In its
I
place
don't
was
have
a
it
woman
with me
who
at the
knew she
moment.
was in deep trouble but
The
was still
judge
grasping
frowned.
at any last shred of control.
Do you have it at all?
The judge,
Silence.
an older man with a stern
Mike
face and a
folded his
no-nonsense
arms.
attitude, looked over the case file for a long
Because
moment
according to
before
county
adjusting his
records,
glasses.
she
filed false paperwork
Let me get this
declaring
straight,
herself the
he said,
HOA president
glancing at
3
Karen.
days after selling the plaintiff's home.
As
president of a homeowners
Meaning,
association,
Your Honor,
she
sold
committed
this
real
man's
estate
house
fraud
because
by
you believed
operating
it was
under false
abandoned.
pretenses. Karen cleared
John
her throat
had never
and lifted
seen
her
someone
chin.
squirm so hard in
Yes,
their seat.
Your Honor. The judge exhaled
As per
slowly
HOA
and turned to
guidelines,
Karen.
abandoned properties are
Miss
subject
Langley,
to recovery
do you have
and
an
resale
actual legal
to
defense
maintain
here?
neighborhood standards?
Because so far,
The judge
all
flipped
I'm
the
seeing
page
is
in the
fraudulent
file.
activity.
According to county
fabricated
records,
organization,
there is no registered
and one of the
homeowners
most blatant
association
misuses
in this
of property
neighborhood.
law I've ever seen.
Karen's lips pressed into
Karen's
a thin
face
line.
flushed red. That's a clerical
Your
error.
Honor,
I was only trying to
Mike
protect
let out
the
a
neighborhood.
quiet chuckle,
and John
There
had
are
to fight the
rules.
urge to smile.
The judge held up
The
a hand.
judge was already unimpressed.
There are no rules because there
This
is
was
no
going to be
homeowners
easier than
association.
expected.
You
The
acted
judge
on
turned his
personal
sharp
authority
gaze back
that you
to
did not
Karen.
have, forged
And
legal
you were the
documents,
sole person
and
responsible
unlawfully
for
transferred
overseeing this
property
transaction
that was never
yours to begin with.
Karen nodded.
He turned to Mike.
Yes,
as the acting
requesting
president of
full
the
damages.
HOA. Mike nodded. Absolutely. Property loss, damages, emotional distress, legal fees. And because she's been collecting illegal HOA dues from multiple residents for years, we're also filing a class action lawsuit. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. John could almost hear the panic setting in. The judge leaned forward. And just how many residents have been paying into this non-existent HOA? Mike slid a file across the table. According to these bank statements, dozens. She's been running a full-fledged scam for years. The courtroom was silent for a long moment. Then the judge sighed. Miss Langley, do you have anything to say for yourself before I make my ruling? Karen swallowed hard. I was only trying to help. The judge looked completely unimpressed. Help yourself, maybe. My ruling is as follows. The sale of the plaintiff's home is null and void. The property legally belongs to Mr. Callahan. Additionally, Miss Langley is ordered to pay all associated legal fees and return every dime she has ever collected from the residents under false HOA pretenses. Lastly, she will be referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to fraud and real estate misrepresentation. Karen's entire body sagged. The smugness, the superiority, it all crumbled. She had lost. John let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It was over. Chapter 7, A New Beginning. Your Honor, let's be clear about something. By the time they left the courtroom, the news had already spread. She was not acting as the president of anything. Other scammed homeowners were furious, does not exist in any legal capacity, which was legally still hers for now. There was never a growing crowd of angry neighbors outside, no tax demanding their money back, no board. Mike she just took it upon herself to invent authority and then used that was almost too easy. Karen John smirked. That's not true. I have a feeling Karen's going to have a really bad week. Then please provide the court with the official HOA documentation. A few weeks later, hesitated. John was finally back in his house. I don't have everything it with me had been returned to normal. Well, the judge almost everything. Do you have it at all? Karen had disappeared from the neighborhood, silence, forced to sell her own home to cover her debts. His arms. The IRS was looking into her finances because according to county records, John heard, she filed false paperwork declaring herself the homeowners had thankfully gotten their money back selling the plaintiff's transaction and had moved on, meaning probably regretting ever dealing with real estate fraud by operating under false pretenses. John stood on his front porch. John had never seen someone squirm so hard in their seat. Mike the judge exhaled looking entirely too pleased with himself. Miss Langley,
Thought
do you
I'd
have an
drop by
actual
and see
legal
the
defense
kingdom
you
here?
fought so hard for?
Because so
he said,
far,
eyeing
all
the
I'm
house.
seeing is fraudulent activity,
Still standing,
a completely fabricated
no
organization,
new HOA signs,
and one of the most blatant
John
misuses of
laughed.
property law I've ever
Nope.
seen.
And
Karen's
if anyone
face
even
flushed
mentions the
red.
word HOA
Your
to
Honor,
me again,
I was only
might
trying to
actually
protect the
lose it.
neighborhood.
Mike
There
smirked.
are rules.
Well,
The
in
judge
that
held up a
case,
hand.
you might be interested in this.
There are no rules because
He
there is
handed
no
John an
homeowners
envelope.
association.
Confused,
You acted
John
on personal
opened it and
authority
stared
that
at
you
the
did not
contents.
have, forged legal
It was
documents,
a foreclosure
and
notice
unlawfully
for
transferred
Karen's
property
house.
that was never yours to
John's
begin with.
eyebrows shot up.
He turned to Mike.
You bought her house,
Requesting full damages.
Mike grinned.
Mike
Not
nodded.
yet.
Absolutely.
But the bank's auctioning it off next
Property
month.
loss, damages,
Thought you might want to bid
emotional
on it.
distress, legal
John
fees.
looked at the notice,
Then
and
at
because
the
she's
empty
been
house
collecting
across the
illegal
street.
HOA dues
A
from
slow
multiple
smile
residents for
spread
years,
across his face.
we're also filing a class action lawsuit.
He said,
taking another
Karen's
sip
mouth
of coffee,
opened,
then closed.
I love that idea.
John could almost hear
And
the
just
panic
like that,
setting in.
the final nail in Karen's
the judge
coffin
leaned
was
forward.
set.
The
And
fake
just how
HOA
many residents
queen
have
had
been
lost
paying into
everything,
this
and
non-existent
John,
HOA?
he had won in the best way
Mike
possible.
slid a file across the table.
According to these bank statements, dozens. She's been running a full-fledged scam for years. The courtroom was silent for a long moment. Then the judge sighed. Miss Langley, do you have anything to say for yourself before I make my ruling? Karen swallowed hard. I was only trying to help. The judge looked completely unimpressed. Help yourself, maybe. My ruling is as follows: the sale of the plaintiff's home is null and void. The property legally belongs to Mr. Callahan. Additionally, Miss Langley is ordered to pay all associated legal fees and return every dime she has ever collected from the residents under false HOA pretenses. Lastly, she will be referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to fraud and real estate misrepresentation. Karen's entire body sagged. The smugness, the superiority, it all crumbled. She had lost. John let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It was over. Chapter 7, A New Beginning. By the time they left the courtroom, the news had already spread. Other scammed homeowners were furious, and Karen's house, which was legally still hers for now, had a growing crowd of angry neighbors outside, demanding their money back. Mike grinned as they walked toward the parking lot. That was almost too easy. John smirked. I have a feeling Karen's going to have a really bad week. Mike chuckled. Try the rest of her life. A few weeks later, John was finally back in his house. Everything had been returned to normal, well, almost everything. Karen had disappeared from the neighborhood, forced to sell her own home to cover her debts. The IRS was looking into her finances, and from what John heard, they weren't happy. The new homeowners had thankfully gotten their money back from the shady transaction and had moved on, probably regretting ever dealing with Karen in the first place. John stood on his front porch, sipping his coffee, when a familiar car pulled up. Mike stepped out, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Thought I'd drop by and see the kingdom you fought so hard for, he said, eyeing the house. Still standing. No new HOA signs. John laughed. Nope. And if anyone even mentions the word HOA to me again, I might actually lose it. Mike smirked. Well, in that case, you might be interested in this. He handed John an envelope. Confused, John opened it and stared at the contents. It was a foreclosure notice, for Karen's house. John's eyebrows shot up. You bought her house. Mike grinned. Not yet. But the bank's auctioning it off next month. Thought you might want to bid on it. John looked at the notice, then at the empty house across the street. A slow smile spread across his face. Oh, he said, taking another sip of coffee. I love that idea. And just like that, the final nail in Karen's coffin was set. The fake HOA queen had lost everything, and John, He had won in the best way possible.